world. Welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today was born in the Mediterranean resort town of Cannes. He was a man who would have been king. But interestingly, as his life evolved, he engaged closely with the perils of public life. He worked towards supporting and working for the people that he was to be king for. He has been a parliamentarian, a distinguished scholar. He's headed numerous international organizations and bodies that are committed to working for interreligious dialogue, for a dialogue between religion and science. He's chairman of the Aurobindo Society. He's been a member of the Union Cabinet. He's held more political offices than we could perhaps track here in this brief introduction. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Karan Singh. Dr. Karan Singh, the man who would have been king. And also, dare I add, the man who might have been president. You have so frequently, your name keeps coming up.
Yes.
Each time there is a discussion on possible candidates. That's a huge responsibility to carry, that you've constantly been held in this great sort of awe and respect.
Well, all I can say is that I have been lucky, particularly lucky that I didn't become king, because I would have thought that would be very constricting and restraining. It's really much more fun to be able to work in the public domain among people and ideas which one would like to sponsor. Yes, I have had a very varied public life, you're quite right. And it's still on,
So what are the aspirations that that someone like you has? Because you did start, you were regent, and you were amongst, I think you were the first of the former princes to give up your privy purse and to
yes,
donate
that was
it
a long time ago. Now I think that what one can hope to do is, in the new changing situation in the world and in the country, is to articulate certain ideals, certain approaches which would be useful in building a harmonious global society and a harmonious country. I'm not particularly obsessed with any special position. If it comes to me, it comes to me. I'm prepared to fulfill any responsibility that is given to me. But I don't go out of my way to try and seek something in the course of events. For example, you mentioned that I'm now chairman of the Auroville Foundation, not the Auroville Society, the Auroville Foundation. It's a very interesting experiment. It's a small project, an international, inter-regional, interlinguistic, inter-cultural township near Pondicherry. Something interesting, something I enjoy doing. There's the Ethics Committee of Parliament.
Well, let's just start with Auroville. This was Aurobindo's great vision, and mother's really,
yes,
in a more sort of emphatic sense.
Yes.
Didn't quite live up to the potential, didn't quite unfold in the manner that had been predicted and hoped, a kind of Vatican autonomy in India.
Yes, but no. Vatican status is out of the question, but the government of India has passed the Auroville Foundation Act, which gives a very special status to Auroville.
But it hasn't really fulfilled.
Now the fulfillment of that really depends upon the Aurovillians, upon whether they are able to get their act together, whether they are able to work harmoniously with each other and with the foundation, which they do from time to time. I was the first chairman from 91 to 96. At that time there was a lot of resentment against the foundation, but I think they've realized. I said to them the other day, I was in Pondicherry a couple of days ago, I said, without the foundation, you are just 1,500 people in a country of 1,000 million people. So your pehchan, as it were, your support, your security lies in the fact that a foundation has been set up by the government of India. And I added that there was no other country in the world which, to the best of my mind, would pass an act specially for a project like this.
I think in this time of a perceived feeling of despair and a decaying of institutions and society, what was the uniqueness of this
You see, the uniqueness was this was based on the broad vision of Sri Aurobindo, but it was the mother, as you rightly said, who envisaged this international township, a township which would be based upon certain spiritual principles. There was to be no private property. All property was going to be owned. So it was a spiritual commune, shall we say, where everybody would do their work. They would draw maintenance, but they wouldn't become owners, as it were, of the property. And that there would be an experiment in consciousness, in the evolution of consciousness. Now, as you say, it's very difficult to judge whether any evolution of consciousness has taken place at all or not. In fact, sometimes when they have their problems, the reverse seems to be true. But nonetheless, there is something there. They have converted a desert into an oasis of green. They've set up a number of very environmental friendly industries.
Those are sort of the more sort of physical parameters of this. But what is this experiment in consciousness?
This experiment,
you're an authority on Aurobindo. You've done a you did a PhD on that.
But I think that the whole point is that Sri Aurobindo and the mother believed that humanity was on the threshold of a new leap in consciousness, which would be superior, which would be above the normal level of human consciousness.
So the supra-consciousness.
The supra-consciousness. And that the Auroville was an experiment, was a workshop where, a laboratory, if you like, where this sort of consciousness, there is, mind you, the Aurobindo ashram. That is really where the Aurobindo yoga takes place. But Pondicherry was looked upon as a special, unique experiment.
Has it failed, would you say?
No, I wouldn't say it has failed, but I wouldn't say it has succeeded. I think it is somewhere still in between. It's too soon to say. You know, everything takes time. You remember when the French, the great intellectual who was the Minister for Education, asked André Malraux, asked Chu Enlai, Mr. Secretary, what do you think of the French Revolution? He thought for a while, then he said, it's too soon to say. so it's a question of time. I'm not going that far back, but I think it is too soon to say. I think Auroville needs another 15, 20 years before we can assess it. And even then, Rajiv, consciousness is such an abstract sort of entity, if you like, that it will still be difficult. But there should be more indications that there has been a growth of consciousness.
You know, as someone, I have to confess that in my own readings of Aurobindo, I found him somewhat obscure and difficult to comprehend the many nuances of his teaching. Would it be sort of outrageous to ask you to give us a brief, sort of like the Americans do, a 101 on, what is the essential uniqueness of Aurobindo's philosophy?
He is an evolutionary philosopher. He believes that the human being is an intermediate creature, halfway between the animal and the divine. And he feels that now, for the first time, with the advent of human beings, there is a creature on earth who can, as it were, positively associate and cooperate with the processes of evolution. So far evolution was blind, from the rocks, stones, fish, animals. But with the human beings, you can cooperate and telescope what would have taken millions of years into a few centuries. And that can be done by what he called an integral yoga, which involves the bhakti yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga. Is a certain special yoga. And his whole thing was that we should work for the supramentalization of consciousness first. Then, even more audacious, we must fix that consciousness on earth so that the earth itself is ultimately supramentalized.
How do you juxtapose this notion of evolutionary consciousness with your own scholarship and passion for Hinduism?
Yes, well,
how does it locate in that?
It doesn't. The point of departure is this question of transmuting matter. Classical Hinduism simply says bhasvantam shariram. You know, we are not interested in transmuting matter because we believe in the immortal Atman which keeps getting reborn. But Aurobindo was very geocentric, he and the mother. He said that no, the earth is a very special place in the cosmos and its destiny is to be transmuted. Matter itself is to be transmuted. Now that is a point of departure from classical Hindus. Otherwise, he accepts the Vedanta and the other things, but he says that my yoga begins where other yogas end. To which I say that the other yogas are endless. So, you know, but it is a different.
You're watching a continuing conversation with Dr. Karan Singh. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Implicit in the aspirations of a scholar, statesman such as you is the notion of values and ethics. You have spent well, virtually a lifetime in politics, something that we don't sort of much longer or substantially associate with ethics and values. And you're now sort of heading a Rajya Sabha committee on ethics. What is the aspiration of this committee? I mean, all we see is sort of issues of tainted ministers, pandemonium in the House.
I'm afraid politics has become very, very unethical in all senses of that term. Not only in the classical sense of a lot of money being involved in election and the electoral process and so on, but in the deeper sense of sort of behavioral attitudes of people and the way they behave in Parliament and so on. So this ethics committee was already there. They've already come out with 3 reports. But so far, I was going through the reports, Rajiv, and they deal mainly with the sort of code of conduct of MPs outside of Parliament. If an MP does something which is inappropriate and if a complaint is made, then the ethics committee looks into it. Frankly, that's not the way I'm going to play this. My view is that the highest ethics of a parliamentarian is the way he or she behaves in Parliament. If you shout and scream in Parliament, if you raise slogans, if you troop into the well of the House, I think that is unethical, because people are elected to Parliament to perform a certain function. If you disrupt question hour, for example, now question hour, as you know, costs I don't know how many umpteen crores of rupees per question or whatever in order to collect the information and all. And you find question hour disrupted. Is that not unethical? So I would tend to, I'll consult my colleagues, of course, because there are some distinguished MPs on the board. We are scheduled to meet in a few days. But I would say that we should concentrate on codes of conduct for MPs within the House. And this is because this is Rajya Sabha. It will be Rajya Sabha, but pari passu it could also apply to the Lok Sabha. And there I think, Rajiv, we have got to change our methodology, because the way things are going, and this last session was a horrific experience. It's no use saying, bhai, aapne ye kiya tha and aapne wo kiya tha. The fact is, people are now looking at what is happening today, and if this goes on.
But isn't this, again, sort of, as a connoisseur of culture in the more sort of valued sense, isn't this a reflection of culture? A culture that prevails in Parliament, of a culture that prevails in politics, and are you sure that sort of the notion of passing rules or what have you is really going to impact this?
No, you're quite right. Parliament, shall we say, is becoming more accurately representative of what is happening in society than it was previously. Previously, it was very, if you like, elitist, and it was somewhat cut off from the nitty-gritty and the realities of life. However, I think that parliamentarians have a very special responsibility to fulfill, because they are watched now on television. Don't forget that. And if crores of people in the country every day see the parliamentarians virtually coming to blows or disrupting the House or the 2 houses, it will erode the legitimacy of our democratic system. The real danger is that it will erode the legitimacy of our democratic system. And if that happens, then we're in for real trouble.
I think sort of the logic of the imperative to achieve what you're seeking to do is abundantly clear. But the concern, the question, the fear really is, is it possible? Is it possible through one man's initiative? What are the larger forces and factors that we might begin to look at?
The fear is well founded. Some people think that we've got into a negative spiral and there's nothing really that now can be done to prevent it. But I would say that is really a counsel of despair. I think we have to continue to try, and it is not as if everybody does it. I mean, there are in Parliament people of great learning, great probity. Just now we learnt of the passing away of the great scientist Dr. Raja Ramanna. He was in the Raj Sabha for 6 years. The problem is that these sort of people are in the Raj Sabha. They seldom get a chance to be heard. We have scientists, we have intellectuals in the Raj Sabha who are there because of their individual achievements. लेकिन वो मौका ही नहीं मिलता बोलने का.
What is your take on this issue of tainted ministers, which has been...
My own view has been for a long time, Rajiv, that the idea the Election Commission had mooted, that those against whom there were criminal cases should not be allowed to contest the elections. You remember that was the idea. And then ultimately it was diluted to say that all you have to do is to give a list of the criminal cases against you when you file your nomination. But I think electoral reform there can help. For example, electoral reform has helped in many ways. The elections to the Raj Sabha, for example, and various other things. Now, this is part of electoral reform. If we can get onto the statute book a law that prevents people with a criminal background from contesting elections, then of course the question arises, what is a criminal background? Does it have to be simply an FIR or does it have to be a case? These are all technical matters. But that is the way. We have to prevent it from the source. Because once people get elected, Rajiv, then quite frankly one MP is as good or as bad as another.
But you know, barring people like Dr. Manmohan Singh, obviously, who sort of has become this great icon of honesty in public life, but you know, he failed to get popularly elected.
Yes.
We have seen, or we have sort of perceived a tradition from Chanakya where politics is associated with scheming, calculation, manipulation. Is there really a role for ethics in politics? Does it happen anywhere?
Well, I would say yes and no. I mean, to expect politicians to be paragons of virtue and ethical high standards is not obviously realistic. But the Gita says, Yat yat acharati shreshta sattate vitaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastatanu. In other words, the way the leaders behave really becomes an example for what other people do. So, once somebody is elected to Parliament, I think there has to be a self-denying ordinance upon unacceptable behavior.
How difficult do you find it to sort of make these compromises? Are you
see, as far as I am concerned, I just, you know, I just sit, as I said, I'm a trained speaker and I'm a trained singer, but I'm not a trained shouter. So we just sit silently and watch the tamasha.
Not just what happens in Parliament, but
outside.
The entire process that circumscribes political public life.
That brings in the broader question of social values. And there, I'm afraid, if you saw the list of corrupt countries, we are 88th or something out of 150.
But how do you resolve your personal commitment to integrity, to surviving in the political system?
But personal commitment simply I resolve by not being corrupt. I mean, you know, for example, I was a minister for 10 years. I didn't draw any salary. And I lived in my own house. No big deal because I've got a nice house. But nonetheless, you know, that sort of thing one does. And one tries in one's own public life to give rather than take. But, you know, if you are in that position, that's all one can do personally, you know, you can't do anything more. But as I think most religious leaders say, and I think, if I remember correctly, the Dalai Lama also mentions that the only way you can start changing society is by changing yourself. So one tries in one's own way to maintain and live up to certain inner standards. But the point you raise is a very valid one. Social values are deteriorating, and that is partially due to the breakdown of the old value system, the non-emergence of a new value system, and the hyper-consumerism that is now sweeping across the world, and the absence of any any ethical norms. Now, that is where educators, that is where the public, that is where the media, that is where younger people. I must say that it is not all bleak. The young people in India, I find, Rajiv, and I travel extensively, they are very, very bright. And they have a lot of idealism. The problem is the moment they get into the mainstream, they realize that the only way they can get ahead is to fall in line with the
dominant culture.
Yuga Dharma, which happens to be a negative one. But we have to bring a countervailing coalition of people who are in favor of harmony, in favor of conflict resolution, and in favor of at least a modicum of ethical values.
You're watching a conversation with Dr. Karan Singh. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to our continuing conversation with Dr. Karan Singh. As someone, and I started the program as saying someone who might have been king, you have obviously a very passionate involvement in processes in Jammu and Kashmir. It has been a source of so much despair and anguish. As we record this, there is a negotiation. There seems to be new hope. India and Pakistan are talking to each other again. Yes. What future do you see unfolding?
Well, I have, as you said, I have followed this literally from my childhood, from my birth, and I've watched the whole history unfold, and it is a very, very tragic history. The amount of human suffering that has been involved in Jammu and Kashmir has been something terrible. The attrition, the psychological price people are paying, and the continuing conflicts and the killings, and it has converted what really was a paradise into something which is almost the opposite.
What do you see as the central issue? I know these sort of gross simplifications for the media are unfair and difficult, but what is the central issue in Kashmir today for you?
You see, the central issue really is that the state of Jammu and Kashmir was one of 300 Indian states, and all the rest of them got integrated either into India or into Pakistan. Jammu Kashmir, located as it was, bang in the middle of the two new countries, wasn't able to work out a pattern of integration. So India was partitioned. Jammu Kashmir has also been partitioned de facto, but unfortunately not de jure. So the thing is that although only 50% of the original territory of my father's state is in our control, by the way, now. As much as 42,000 square miles is no longer under our control. So there has been a partition, but it's messy and it's unaccepted by both sides. We do not accept that they have a right over that area. They do not accept that we have a right. So the whole thing has become a horrible mess. So
many sort of solutions and possibilities.
I have my own views. I have my own views on how it can be done. But I do not intend, Rajiv, to spell them out at this stage, because whatever I say, I think has some special significance because of my historical background and my thing. So I don't want to prematurely come out with any clear-cut or neat solution, because all that will happen is that it will make headlines and get shot down, and that will be the end of it. But I can tell you this.
What are some of the principles
I can tell you this, that I am beginning to exchange views with now that we've got a Congress government in power, because 6 or 7 years there was a BJP government, they were not interested in my views, and before that also. But now, with this new atmosphere that you speak of, with the global compulsions that are developing, with the pressure that is on Musharraf also, with our own desire, there is some glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, and I will certainly try and help. That's all I'd like to say at this stage. I would like to help, and my views, my suggestions will be available, and perhaps a little later down the road we may talk about that in some detail. At this stage I'd simply like to say that yes, I'm deeply concerned and worried, And yes, I have got certain ideas as to what should be done. And yes, I am beginning now to discuss those ideas with the people who matter.
You've had an empathetic relationship with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and certainly on the Indian side. Have you interacted with people on the other side of the line of control?
No, I haven't, as a matter of fact. I haven't ever met anybody from the other side of the line of control. And our side also, as you know, one of the basic features of the state is that it is a multi-regional state. It is not a homogeneous state. Even on our side now, we have Ladakh, which is, as you know, is culturally an extension of Tibet, a huge area. We have the Jammu region, which has got its own culture. And then you have the Kashmir Valley. The Kashmiriyat that you talk of is really confined to the Kashmir Valley, which has a majority of the population, but which is not the entire Jammu and Kashmir state. In fact, one of the problems we face is the shorthand of using the word Kashmir for Jammu and Kashmir. It's like if you were to tell a Scotsman that you're English, he'd say, no, I'm not English. I'm British, but I'm not English. A Welshman would say, I'm not English. Similarly, a Dogra would say, I'm not Kashmiri. A Ladakhi would say, I'm not a Kashmiri. So there's a lack of understanding of the ethnic, linguistic, geographical features of the regions, and an attempt to come to a solution which would be acceptable to all the region, which to my mind is a virtual impossibility. That's all I can say at this stage.
You know, as someone who's been active in public life for so long, or a man of scholarship, a man of so many facets, they wouldn't even try to expound on those or expand on those. What remains your core aspiration, your essential striving?
My essential striving, of course, is inner. It is inner striving, the striving towards spiritual realization. That is really the basic inner core of my life, and has been for many years. That does not rule out an outer involvement, and in the outer life, my effort is to try and encourage and support the interfaith movement, the conflict resolution movement, the educational Renaissance movement, and to look after various trusts and committees and all. In other words, to try and be a positive presence in society.
And what is the goal of that inner spiritual striving?
The goal of the inner spiritual striving is to be able to say with the seer of the Upanishad, Vedaham etam purusham mahantam aditya varanam tamasap parastat. I have seen that great being shining like the sun beyond the darkness. In other words, being able to fulfill the Vedantic concept of the divinity inherent in all beings and inherent in oneself, to be able to access that and to be able to reach, as it were, the holy grail within us.
That's been a great blessing. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.